any man who's half awake can spot a trap that's laid for him, but to stride in boldly with a plan to turn it on its ear, that is a marvellous thing. To set a trap and know someone will come in wary, ready with a trick of their own, then beat them, that is twice as marvellous. The point is to play a beautiful game. The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. Hey, Hannah Mouse 1 here. HBO's TV adaptation of George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, contains some of the most intelligent characters ever put to screen, like Tyrion Lannister, but also some of the stupidest, like Tyrion Lannister. Yeah, clearly something went wrong there, and with Littlefinger, and with Varys, and yeah, starting to see a pattern here. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with having less intelligent characters in your work, as long as you're trying to write a less intelligent character, which isn't the case here. So let's analyse A Game of Thrones and see what we can learn about writing intelligence. Spoilers, obviously, and I am focusing more on the show than the books. There's overlap, obviously, but where they diverge, I'll be following the show's version of events. So let's take a look at some of the base rules that I think we can glean from Game of Thrones, starting with motivation. These characters all have some sort of through line that they are consistently working towards. This can change based on things that happen to them, but generally speaking, these are their motivations. For Peter Baelish, his motivations are self-serving. He wants to climb as far up the ladder of chaos as possible. He also tells Sansa in season 7 that his goal is to sit on the Iron Throne with Sansa as his queen. Every time I'm faced with a decision, I close my eyes and see the same picture. A picture of me on the Iron Throne and you by my side. Varys' interests are about doing what's best for the realm. Being a lowborn who experienced horrific injustices and then climbed his own way up to a position of power, his heart is still with the little guy, with the people. And for Tyrion, he's constantly trying to balance his moral compass, his vices, and his desire to be a worthy member of House Lannister. And the show is fairly consistent with these motivations, in theory, up through season 8. However, where the show falls short is having a clear through line from each action that the characters take to their overarching motivation. Let's look at Peter Baelish for a moment and compare his killing of Joffrey in season 4 to his selling Sansa to the Boltons in season 5. After he kills Joffrey, he says that a man with no motive is a man no one suspects. But he's not actually saying that he doesn't have a motive. He's not going to commit regicide without due cause. But aside from the fact that almost everyone in the Seven Kingdoms had a motive for wanting Joffrey dead, it makes complete sense for Baelish to want the Tyrells on side, Sansa in his pocket and Tyrion executed, which would put Sansa back into the eligible bachelorette category. When he says that he's a man with no motive, what he's saying is that his motive is less overtly apparent than, say, Tyrion's or Sansa's. So they'd probably overlook someone who's supposed to be in the Vale hooking up with Lysa Arryn. But compare that to selling Sansa to the Boltons. He doesn't have a decent motive here. While you might be able to see why he'd want the Warden of the North in his corner, the Boltons were not a valuable ally here. They were never liked in the North because of their betrayal of the Starks. Tyrion put a crossbow bolt through the Lannister support for the Boltons, and Littlefinger admits that a betting man would bet on Stannis to conquer Winterfell on his way south. If anything, jeopardizing his relationship with the only person who knows what really happened to Lysa, the only surviving Stark as far as he knows, and the woman he wants to marry is so stupid and is a direct step backwards from his overarching goal. And it's all to mirror a book plotline that happened to someone completely different on the page. And it does feel a bit like, am I missing something here? Surely Peter didn't do something so mindlessly stupid without good reason. Surely his larger game will be revealed. But no, he dies without us ever seeing how all of this factored into his greater plan. I suppose that this comes down to an issue which plagues the later season of Game of Thrones. If a character makes a nonsensical, out-of-character decision for the sake of the plot, they tend to come across as a bit of a moron. They needed someone for Ramsay to abuse, and Sansa wasn't doing anything. Who cares if it's detrimental for her character to be back in a position of captivity and for Peters to hand her off like this? We need it to happen for the story. Or when the Master of Whisperers goes around like, oi everybody, I'm gonna commit a treason, when at this point Dany hasn't actually done anything significantly evil. In fact, she had taken a significant detour from her own goals in order to help fight against the army of the dead. It felt like such an insane risk on Varys' part for very little reward. Which brings us to the next point. A character knowing something that they couldn't possibly know doesn't make them seem intelligent. The first seasons are very careful about giving clear explanations for these characters' sources of information. Littlefinger has his spies and access to the gossip from the brothels. Varys has his vast network of little birds spanning across continents, and Tyrion's shown often to be reading. There are pros and cons to the different sources. Spies have to be trusted and could have motivations to lie, or else they could be found out and manipulated. At one point, Peter walks Ned through King's Landing and points out whose spies belong to who, so clearly he's aware of their allegiances. In the books, Tyrion laments how his own lack of spies and informants makes him overly reliant on Varys for information about the goings on in the city. But by the end of the show, all of that reasoning has gone out the window. Like when everyone knows that Missandei was captured by Cersei rather than the more logical conclusion that she was killed by one of the massively damaging harpoons. Or how people seem suddenly aware that Dany will go from her cutthroat but understandable system of harsh punishment to randomly murdering civilians and thus want her off the throne. Sansa had no reason to hate Dany as much as she did, other than that Dany's a Southerner and a Targaryen and Sansa's apparently a touch xenophobic. But let's talk about Sansa, shall we? Because her character was decimated by the later season of the show. She starts off as sweet and naive, the fairy tale life she believed in falling away before her eyes. She's thoroughly outmatched by the people she meets in King's Landing, the ones who know how to play the game. But under Peter's guidance, she learned how to lie, she learned how to play the game, and we see this when she defends Peter at the trial over Lysa's death, and that is the most impressive thing that she ever does for the rest of the show, so yeah, bit of a letdown that one. In terms of motivation, it seems to be to better the North and to see its independence, even when the King of the Seven Kingdoms is a Stark, which, as stupid as that decision was, should be exactly what the North wanted, but I digress. Sansa does indeed make some nonsensical decisions for the story's sake, namely that she didn't tell Jon about the Knights of the Vale before the Battle of the Bastards, despite the fact that she knew that they were looking for more soldiers, and Jon directly asked her how they were supposed to get them, to her insistence that they postpone the battle until they had a larger force. Maybe you could argue that she didn't trust Peter to show, but it still feels like something you'd want to mention, like, I trust him about as far as I could kick him, but he did offer me an army. What do you think? Instead, she acts rather snobbish and withholds this crucial piece of information, and acts like Jon's being petty for not taking her advice when she hasn't even given anything worth listening to. And then everyone treats her like a genius for saving them all and winning the battle for them, when it was largely her fault that their lives were on the line in the first place. And as for knowing things that she couldn't possibly know, yep, she does that too. Take when they receive the letter from Ramsay. Jon, reasonably enough, questions whether or not they can trust Ramsay's word that he's holding Rickon hostage, to which Sansa insists that they can. And maybe you could say that, being more familiar with Ramsay than anyone else, she knows that he's being honest. Because, of course, Ramsay would never lie in order to get leverage over someone, say by pretending to be sent by a captive sister in order to gain his trust and valuable information, going as far as to kill his own men in the process. No, Ramsay is an honest man. But the real reason she knows is that she's read the script and thus knows with absolute certainty that Ramsay is not trying to manipulate them in this moment. Or when Sansa, who has never had an interest in fighting or the systems behind it or anything in that regard, knows how to make armor better than the people who do that professionally and corrects them on it. This is supposed to be a look how smart she is, look how great a leader she is moment, but it doesn't make Sansa seem smart, it makes the people making the armor seem incompetent. Oh, and another thing, everyone saying that someone is smart doesn't actually make them smart if they can't actually demonstrate their intelligence in practice. We repeatedly hear characters say about how smart Sansa is. She's much smarter than she lets on. She's the smartest person I've ever met. But in practice, she can't even figure out how to use a dagger, although this is stupidity for the sake of a season 1 callback. Stick her with the pointy end. But I don't care about how many people say that someone is smart if they can't prove it. It's basic show don't tell. In season 1, they didn't need to have people going around saying, look how smart Peter Baelish is, for us to figure that out, because his intelligence was constantly on full display. So I think that these are some of the reasons that the characters who were presented as vastly intelligent in the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones fell so flat by the end of the show. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did, it lets me know that this is something that you want to see more of. What did you think of Sansa in the later seasons of Game of Thrones? Let me know in the comment section down below, and apart from that, I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!